The last thing Ophelia Owens expected on her wedding day was to discover that her fiancé was a monster. But sometimes the truth arrives with the force of a bullet, fast and brutal and impossible to ignore. The spring morning of May 10th, 1873, dawned clear and bright over Laredo, Texas, the kind of day that made promises feel sacred. Ophelia stood in the back room of the First Baptist Church, her hands trembling as she smoothed down the ivory silk of her wedding dress. At 22 years old, she had believed herself fortunate to be marrying Thomas Whitmore, the son of Laredo's wealthiest cattle rancher. He was handsome, educated, and seemingly devoted to her. Her parents had been overjoyed at the match, seeing in Thomas the security and prosperity they had always wanted for their only daughter. But now, just 30 minutes before the ceremony was to begin, Ophelia heard a sound that would change everything. A sharp crack, skin against skin, followed by a woman's cry of pain. She rushed to the window that overlooked the small garden behind the church, her heart pounding with a dread she could not name. What she saw through the glass made her blood run cold. Thomas stood over his own mother, Margaret Whitmore, who had fallen to her knees among the rose bushes. His hand was still raised, his face twisted with a rage that Ophelia had never witnessed before. Mrs. Whitmore was weeping, one hand pressed to her reddening cheek, the other clutching at her son's trouser leg as if begging for mercy. "I told you to stop questioning my decisions, Mother," Thomas hissed, his voice carrying through the open window. "This is my wedding day, and I will not have you interfering with my choices. Do you understand me?" Mrs. Whitmore nodded frantically, her gray curls coming loose from their pins. "Yes, Thomas, yes, I am sorry. Please forgive me." Ophelia stepped back from the window, her entire body trembling. Her wedding bouquet slipped from her fingers and scattered white roses across the wooden floor. She could not breathe properly. The corset that had seemed merely tight moments before now felt like iron bands crushing her ribs. How could she marry a man who would strike his own mother? What kind of future awaited her in such a union? The door to the dressing room opened, and Ophelia's younger cousin Sarah rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. "Ophelia, it is almost time. Everyone is seated and waiting. You look absolutely beautiful. Thomas is the luckiest man in Texas." Ophelia turned to face Sarah, and something in her expression made the younger girl stop short. "What is wrong? Are you feeling faint? Should I fetch some water?" "I cannot marry him," Ophelia whispered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Sarah, I cannot do this." Sarah's eyes widened. "What are you talking about? The church is full. Your parents are out there. The minister is waiting. This is just nervous jitters, Ophelia. Every bride feels this way." "No." Ophelia grabbed Sarah's hands, squeezing them desperately. "You do not understand. I just saw Thomas strike his mother. He hit her, Sarah. He knocked her to the ground like she was nothing more than a disobedient animal." The color drained from Sarah's face. "Are you certain? Perhaps you misunderstood what you saw." "I know what I witnessed," Ophelia said firmly, "and I know I cannot marry a man capable of such cruelty." Before Sarah could respond, footsteps sounded in the hallway, and Ophelia's mother entered the room, all bustling efficiency and maternal pride. "There you are, my darling girl. It is time. Your father is waiting to walk you down the aisle." She looked between Ophelia and Sarah, sensing the tension. "What is happening here?" Ophelia opened her mouth to explain, but fear closed around her throat. Her mother had been so happy about this marriage. The whole town was celebrating the union of two prominent families. How could she explain what she had seen without causing a scandal that would affect everyone she loved? "Nothing, Mama," she heard herself say, though every instinct screamed at her to tell the truth. "I am just nervous." Her mother smiled warmly and kissed her forehead. "That is perfectly natural, sweet girl. But I promise you, once you see Thomas waiting for you at that altar, all your worries will melt away. He loves you very much. Now come, we must not keep everyone waiting." Ophelia allowed herself to be guided from the room, but her mind was racing. With each step toward the church sanctuary, she felt as though she were walking toward her own doom. The organ music began, swelling through the building, and the congregation rose to their feet. Through the doorway, she could see Thomas standing at the altar in his finest suit, a smile on his face that now seemed more sinister than charming. Her father took her arm, beaming with pride. "Ready, daughter?" Ophelia looked down the long aisle, at the faces of everyone she had known her entire life, all of them expecting her to become Mrs. Thomas Whitmore. She thought of Mrs. Whitmore's tears, of the sound of flesh striking flesh, of the cruel twist to Thomas's mouth, and she knew with absolute certainty that she could not go through with this. "No," she said quietly. Her father bent closer. "What was that?" "No," she repeated, louder this time. "I cannot marry him, Papa." The organ music faltered and stopped. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Every eye in the church turned to stare at Ophelia, frozen in the doorway in her white dress and veil. Thomas took a step forward, his smile slipping. "Ophelia? Darling, what is the matter?" She pulled away from her father's arm and walked into the sanctuary, but not toward the altar. Instead, she moved to where Mrs. Whitmore sat in the front pew, her face carefully composed, despite the angry red mark that was already beginning to bruise on her cheek. "Mrs. Whitmore," Ophelia said clearly, "I saw what your son did to you in the garden. I saw him strike you." A collective gasp rippled through the church. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing, her gaze dropping to her lap. Thomas's face went scarlet, then deathly pale. "Ophelia, you are being hysterical," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "My mother stumbled in the garden, and I was merely helping her to her feet. You misunderstood what you saw." "I did not misunderstand anything," Ophelia said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "I heard you, I saw you, and I will not bind my life to a man who would treat his own mother with such violence." Thomas strode down the aisle toward her, and for the first time, Ophelia saw the real man beneath the charming facade. His eyes were hard and cold, his jaw clenched with rage. "You will regret this humiliation, Ophelia Owens. You will regret embarrassing me in front of the entire town." Ophelia's father stepped between them. "That is enough, Whitmore. If my daughter says she will not marry you, then there will be no marriage. Come, Ophelia, we are leaving." But Thomas grabbed Ophelia's wrist, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to leave marks. "You belong to me," he hissed. "We had an agreement. Your father accepted my proposal, and you will honor that commitment." A strong hand suddenly clamped down on Thomas's shoulder, pulling him away from Ophelia with surprising force. "The lady said no. I suggest you listen." Ophelia looked up to see a tall cowboy she had never met before, though she recognized the type well enough. He was dusty from the trail, with sun-weathered skin and steady gray eyes beneath the brim of his worn hat. He wore a gun belt slung low on his hips, and there was a quiet authority in his stance that made even Thomas step back. "Who the hell are you?" Thomas demanded. "Quinn Thornton," the cowboy said calmly. "I was just passing through town when I heard the commotion. Seemed like a lady might need some assistance." "This is none of your concern," Thomas spat. "This is between me and my bride." "She does not appear to want to be your bride," Quinn observed. "And where I come from, forcing a woman into anything she does not want is the behavior of a coward." Thomas lunged at Quinn, but the cowboy was faster. He sidestepped smoothly and caught Thomas's arm, twisting it behind his back in a hold that made the other man cry out in pain. "I think you should leave now," Quinn said quietly, "before you embarrass yourself any further." The church had erupted into chaos. Women were whispering furiously behind their fans, men were standing and shouting, and the minister looked completely at a loss. Quinn released Thomas, who stumbled away, his face purple with humiliation and rage. "This is not over, Ophelia," Thomas said, pointing at her with a shaking finger. "My family has influence in this town. You will regret crossing me." "Get out," Ophelia's father said, his voice like iron. "Get out of this church and do not come near my daughter again." Thomas looked around at the assembled townspeople, perhaps hoping to find support, but found only stares ranging from shocked to disapproving. Even his own father, the elder Mr. Whitmore, sat stone-faced and silent. With a final venomous glare at Ophelia, Thomas stalked out of the church, his mother hurrying after him with her head bowed. As soon as they were gone, Ophelia's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if Quinn Thornton had not caught her arm, steadying her gently. "Easy there, miss. You are safe now." Ophelia looked up at this stranger, who had appeared like something from a dime novel, arriving at precisely the right moment to help her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Quinn's stern expression softened slightly. "You did the brave thing, Miss Owens. Walking away from a bad situation takes real courage, even when the whole world is watching." Her father appeared at her other side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Come, daughter, let us get you home and out of this dress. Mr. Thornton, I owe you a debt of gratitude for your intervention." "No debt owed, sir," Quinn said, tipping his hat. "Just glad I could help." As Ophelia's parents led her from the church, she glanced back once at the cowboy. Quinn Thornton stood in the aisle, watching her go with an expression she could not quite read. Something about his steady presence had made her feel safe in a moment when her whole world was collapsing. She wondered if she would ever see him again. The next few days passed in a blur of scandal and gossip. The entire town of Laredo buzzed with the story of the abandoned wedding, with opinions divided about whether Ophelia had been right to call off the marriage or whether she had overreacted to a private family matter. The Whitmore family, powerful and proud, made it known that they considered themselves gravely insulted. Thomas himself had left town, though rumors circulated that he was staying at his father's ranch outside Laredo, brooding and angry. Ophelia remained at her parents' home, enduring the sympathetic visits of friends and the cold shoulders of those who believed she had brought shame on herself. Her mother wavered between supporting her daughter's decision and mourning the lost opportunity for such an advantageous marriage. Her father, at least, remained firmly on her side, though Ophelia could see the worry in his eyes. He owned a modest dry goods store, and the Whitmores had considerable power to make life difficult for those who crossed them. On the fourth day after the wedding, that never was, Ophelia decided she could no longer bear being confined to the house like a prisoner. She needed air and sunlight and freedom, even if it meant facing the whispers of the townspeople. She put on a simple calico dress and a straw bonnet, and slipped out the back door while her mother was occupied with household tasks. She walked through the streets of Laredo with her head held high, refusing to show shame for a decision she knew had been right. The town was bustling with the usual traffic of late May, cowboys driving cattle, merchants hawking their wares, women shopping with baskets over their arms. The heat was already building, promising a sweltering summer ahead. As she passed the general store, Ophelia heard a familiar voice call her name. She turned to see Quinn Thornton emerging from the building, a bag of supplies in his arms. He looked much as he had at the church, tall and weathered and capable, though he had clearly made some effort to wash the trail dust from his clothes. "Mr. Thornton," she said, surprised, "I thought you would have moved on from Laredo by now." Quinn set down his supplies and approached her, removing his hat politely. "I had intended to, Miss Owens, but I found some work at the Barker Ranch just outside town. Figured I would stay for a bit, see what Texas has to offer." They stood in the shade of the store's awning, and Ophelia found herself studying his face more carefully now. He had strong, honest features and eyes that seemed to see more than most people did. There was a quiet confidence about him that made her feel safer than she had in days. "How are you holding up?" Quinn asked gently. "That took a lot of nerve, what you did at the church." Ophelia glanced around to make sure no one was close enough to overhear. "I am managing, though I confess the past few days have been difficult. Some people believe I should have kept silent about what I saw." Quinn's expression darkened. "Those people are fools. A man who would strike his own mother is not a man worth marrying, no matter how much money or influence he has." Something about the certainty in his voice made Ophelia's eyes sting with sudden tears. "You truly believe that?" "I know it for a fact," Quinn said firmly. "I have seen enough of the world to recognize the signs, Miss Owens. A man like Thomas Whitmore, who would hurt someone weaker and dependent on him. A man like that will hit you too. Maybe not right away, maybe not until after the wedding, when you are legally bound to him and cannot escape easily. But eventually, his true nature would have shown itself, and you would have been trapped." The tears spilled over, running down Ophelia's cheeks, despite her best efforts to contain them. She had been so afraid that she had made a terrible mistake, that she had thrown away her chance at security and happiness over nothing. But Quinn's words validated the instinct that had made her flee. "I am sorry," she said, wiping at her face with trembling fingers. "I do not mean to fall apart in the middle of the street." Quinn produced a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. "You have nothing to apologize for. You have been through an ordeal. Anyone would be shaken." Ophelia accepted the handkerchief gratefully and dried her eyes. "Thank you for understanding. It seems you are always coming to my rescue, Mr. Thornton." "Quinn," he said, "just Quinn is fine, and I have not done much, just spoken the truth as I see it." They stood together in companionable silence for a moment, watching the street life of Laredo flow around them. Ophelia felt strangely comfortable with this man she barely knew, more comfortable than she had ever felt with Thomas during their entire courtship. "Would you care to take a walk with me?" she found herself asking. "I have been cooped up in the house for days, and I could use the company of someone who does not look at me with either pity or judgment." Quinn smiled, and the expression transformed his serious face into something warm and appealing. "I would be honored, Miss Owens. Let me just get these supplies back to my horse, and I will be right with you." They walked together to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open scrubland dotted with mesquite and creosote bush. The Rio Grande flowed in the distance, a ribbon of water in the harsh landscape. Ophelia had grown up in Laredo and knew every inch of this country, but somehow it looked different walking beside Quinn Thornton, more vivid and alive. "How long have you been working as a cowboy?" she asked, genuinely curious about his life. "About 10 years now," Quinn said. "I grew up on a small farm in Missouri, but after the war, I headed west looking for work. I have been moving from ranch to ranch ever since, going wherever the cattle are." "That sounds like a lonely existence." Quinn considered this. "It can be, but there is freedom in it too. I answer to no one but myself, go where I please, work when I want to work. Some men are not made for settling down in one place." "And you are one of those men?" Ophelia asked, surprised by the disappointment she felt at the thought. "I always thought I was," Quinn said slowly. "But lately I have been wondering if maybe I have just been waiting to find the right reason to stop drifting." They walked on, and Ophelia felt her heart beating faster than the gentle pace of their steps warranted. She told herself not to be foolish, that this was just a kind stranger offering her support in a difficult time, but she could not ignore the way her body responded to his presence. When his arm accidentally brushed against hers, she felt the contact like a spark of electricity. "Tell me something about yourself," Quinn said, "something that has nothing to do with Thomas Whitmore or weddings or scandal." Ophelia thought for a moment. "I love to read," she said finally. "Whenever I can get my hands on a book, I devour it. Novels, poetry, history, anything. My mother despairs of me sometimes because I would rather have my nose in a book than learn the proper household management." "What kind of books do you like best?" "Adventure stories," Ophelia admitted. "Tales of faraway places and brave people doing extraordinary things. I suppose I have always wanted more than what Laredo had to offer." "And marrying Thomas Whitmore would have kept you here forever," Quinn observed. "Yes, trapped in a grand house with a cruel man, expected to produce heirs and host dinner parties and never speak my own mind." Ophelia shuddered. "When you say it aloud, it sounds like a prison sentence." "That is because it would have been one." They had reached a small grove of cottonwood trees near the river, and they stood in the shade, watching the water flow past. Ophelia turned to face Quinn, feeling a rush of gratitude and something deeper, something she was almost afraid to name. "You have done more for me than you realize, Quinn Thornton. Not just at the church, but now, helping me see that I made the right choice. I wish I knew how to repay you." Quinn met her eyes, and Ophelia saw something in his gaze that made her breath catch. "You do not owe me anything, Ophelia. May I call you Ophelia?" "Yes," she whispered. "I would like that." They stood very close together in the dappled shade, and Ophelia thought for a wild moment that he might kiss her. But instead, Quinn stepped back, clearing his throat awkwardly. "I should get you back to town, before your parents worry. The last thing you need is more gossip about you keeping company with a drifter." Ophelia wanted to protest that she did not care about gossip, that she wanted to stay here by the river with him for hours, but she knew he was right. With a sigh, she nodded, and they began the walk back to Laredo. Over the next 2 weeks, Quinn and Ophelia found excuses to see each other nearly every day. He would appear at her father's store when she was helping with inventory, or she would happen to be taking a walk when he was riding back from the Barker Ranch. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering a connection that felt both exciting and inevitable. Quinn told her about his travels across the frontier, about nights spent under the stars and the satisfaction of hard physical work. Ophelia shared her dreams of seeing the world beyond Texas, of visiting the great cities she had read about in books. With each conversation, Ophelia felt herself falling deeper. Quinn made her laugh with his dry observations about ranch life. He listened to her opinions as though they mattered, never dismissing her thoughts the way Thomas had, and there was a gentleness in him, a fundamental kindness that showed in how he treated everyone from the stable boy to the elderly shopkeepers. This was a good man, Ophelia realized, perhaps the best man she had ever known. But there was a problem, one that neither of them spoke aloud, but that hung over every meeting. Quinn was a drifter, a man who had built his life around not staying in one place. And Ophelia, despite her dreams of adventure, was rooted in Laredo by family and circumstance. How could anything lasting grow between them when they wanted such different lives? The question was forced into the open on a June evening, when Quinn asked Ophelia to have supper with him at the town's modest restaurant. They sat at a corner table, sharing a simple meal of beef stew and cornbread, and Ophelia noticed that Quinn seemed nervous in a way she had never seen before. "Is something wrong?" she asked, setting down her spoon. Quinn took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something, Ophelia. The work at the Barker Ranch is finished. They only needed extra hands for the spring roundup, and that is done now. I will be leaving Laredo at the end of the week." Ophelia felt as though she had been struck. "Leaving? Where will you go?" "North, probably. I heard there is work in Colorado, and I have never worked cattle in the mountains. Thought I would give it a try." "I see." Ophelia forced her voice to remain steady, even as her heart was breaking. "Of course. You have your life to live. I thank you for all your kindness to me during this difficult time." Quinn reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Ophelia, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, and what she saw there made her throat tighten. "These past 2 weeks with you have been the best of my life," Quinn said quietly. "I did not come to Laredo looking for anything except work and a place to rest my horse. But I found you instead, and now the thought of leaving makes me feel like I am tearing myself in half." "Then do not go," Ophelia said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Stay in Laredo, find more work. There are other ranches, other opportunities." "And what would I be staying for? To court you properly under the watchful eyes of your parents and the whole town? To try to build a life here when I have no land, no prospects, nothing to offer you except a saddle and a horse?" "I do not care about those things," Ophelia insisted, gripping his hand tightly. "I care about you, Quinn. I care about the way you make me feel safe and understood. I care about your kindness and your honesty, and the way you see the world. Those things matter more than land or money." Quinn smiled sadly. "You say that now, but you deserve better than a rootless cowboy who moves from job to job. You deserve stability and security, a real home. I deserved better than Thomas Whitmore, and I had the courage to walk away from that. Do not tell me what I deserve, Quinn Thornton. Let me decide that for myself." They stared at each other across the table, the restaurant fading away until it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Quinn's thumb traced circles on the back of Ophelia's hand, and she could see the war being waged behind his eyes, duty fighting with desire. "What are you saying, Ophelia?" he asked finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I am saying that I am falling in love with you," she said simply. "And if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then we will find a way to make this work. Together." Quinn closed his eyes for a long moment, and when he opened them again, they were bright with feeling. "I do feel it. God help me. I fell for you the moment I saw you standing in that church, brave enough to speak the truth even when it cost you everything. But I am afraid, Ophelia. I am afraid of failing you, of not being able to give you the life you deserve. The only way you could fail me is by leaving and never coming back," Ophelia said firmly. "I am not asking for promises of forever right now. I am just asking you to stay a little longer. Give us a chance to see where this might lead." Quinn was quiet for a long time, his fingers still intertwined with hers. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, I will stay. I will find more work, and we will see what happens. But, Ophelia, you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if you change your mind, if you decide that this is not what you want, you will tell me honestly. I could not bear it if you stayed with me out of obligation or pity." "I promise," Ophelia said, her heart soaring, "though I cannot imagine changing my mind about you." They finished their meal in a glow of happiness, making plans for how Quinn could find more permanent work in the area. As they walked back through the warm evening, Quinn suddenly pulled Ophelia into the shadow of a building and kissed her, a gentle, tentative press of lips that sent shivers down her spine. It was Ophelia's first real kiss, and it felt like coming home and setting off on an adventure all at once. "I have wanted to do that since the day we met," Quinn murmured against her hair. "Then you should have done it sooner," Ophelia said, rising on her toes to kiss him again. But their happiness was short-lived. When Quinn went to inquire about work at other ranches in the area, he found doors closing in his face. Word had spread that he was courting Ophelia Owens, and the Whitmore family had made it clear that anyone who employed Quinn Thornton would lose their business and their standing in the community. The elder Whitmore was as powerful as promised, and his son's humiliation had turned the family's influence against the cowboy who had dared to interfere. Quinn came to the Owens home one evening, his face grim. Ophelia met him on the porch, her parents discreetly staying inside to give them privacy. "They have blackballed me," Quinn said without preamble. "I cannot find work anywhere in the region. The Whitmores have seen to that." Ophelia felt cold despite the summer heat. "What will you do?" "I will have to leave. I have enough money saved to last a few weeks, but I cannot stay in Laredo without work. I will head north as planned and find employment where the Whitmore name carries no weight." "Then I am coming with you," Ophelia said immediately. Quinn stared at her. "Ophelia, you cannot be serious. You cannot just leave your family and your home to follow a cowboy you have known for less than a month." "Why not? You said it yourself. There is freedom in the wandering life. I have spent 22 years doing what was expected of me, following the rules, being the dutiful daughter. Look where it got me, nearly married to a monster. I want something different now. I want adventure. I want you. Your parents would never allow it. And honestly, Ophelia, I would not ask it of you. The trail is hard and dangerous. We would be traveling rough, sleeping under the stars, never certain where the next meal is coming from. That is no life for a woman raised as you were." "Then marry me," Ophelia said, the idea forming even as she spoke it. "Marry me tonight, and then I will be your wife, not your burden. We will face whatever comes together, as partners." Quinn looked thunderstruck. "Ophelia, I cannot. I have nothing to offer you. No home, no security, nothing but a horse and a saddle and a few dollars in my pocket. You have yourself, and that is all I need. Please, Quinn, I know this is fast. I know it seems crazy, but I also know that what I feel for you is real, and I am not willing to lose you because of Thomas Whitmore's vindictiveness." Quinn cupped her face in his hands, his expression torn between hope and doubt. "If we do this, there is no going back. Your parents might disown you. The town will certainly condemn you. You will be giving up everything you have ever known." "I am not giving up anything that matters," Ophelia said firmly. "I am choosing something better. I am choosing love and freedom and a life lived on my own terms. Say yes, Quinn. Please say yes." For a long moment, Quinn just looked at her, and Ophelia held her breath, praying that he would not turn her down. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that lit him up from within. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes, Ophelia Owens, I will marry you. Tonight, tomorrow, whenever you want, for as long as you will have me." Ophelia threw her arms around his neck, laughing and crying at the same time. They stood on the porch wrapped in each other's arms as the sun set over Laredo, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. But there was still the matter of her parents. Ophelia knew they had to be told, and she dreaded the conversation. She asked Quinn to wait on the porch while she went inside to break the news. Her mother and father were in the parlor, her mother knitting and her father reading the newspaper. They looked up expectantly as Ophelia entered, and she realized with a pang how much she was about to hurt them. "Mama, Papa, I need to speak with you about something important." Her father set down his paper, frowning. "That sounds serious, daughter. Sit down and tell us what is troubling you." Ophelia remained standing, needing to be strong for what came next. "Quinn is leaving Laredo. The Whitmores have made it impossible for him to find work here. He is heading north to Colorado, and I am going with him." Her mother's knitting needles clattered to the floor. "You are what?" "I am going with Quinn. We are going to be married, and then we are leaving together." Her father stood up, his face flushing with anger. "Absolutely not. I will not allow you to throw your life away on a man you barely know, running off to God knows where with no plan and no future." "I am not asking your permission, Papa," Ophelia said, as gently as she could. "I am 22 years old, and I am capable of making my own decisions. I love Quinn, and he loves me. We want to build a life together. He is using you. her mother said shrilly. He is a drifter with nothing to his name, and he sees you as a meal ticket. Ophelia, please, think about what you are doing. You called off one wedding already. Do not make another mistake. Thomas Whitmore was the mistake, Ophelia said firmly. Quinn Thornton is the opposite. He is kind and honest and good, and he makes me happier than I have ever been. I know this seems sudden, but I also know my own heart. Her father crossed the room and gripped her shoulders. Daughter, listen to me. This man is asking you to give up everything for him. Your home, your family, your security. What kind of man would ask that of a woman he claims to love? He did not ask it, Ophelia said, pulling free. I offered it. Quinn tried to convince me to stay here, but I refused to let the Whitmores control my life. They ruined one chance at happiness, and I will not let them ruin another. I am leaving with Quinn, with or without your blessing. Her parents stared at her, and Ophelia saw the exact moment they realized she meant every word. Her mother began to cry, pressing her handkerchief to her eyes. Her father looked older suddenly, weighed down by disappointment and fear. If you do this, he said slowly, if you run off with this cowboy without even a proper wedding, you will be ruining your reputation permanently. No decent person will receive you. You will be cut off from respectable society. Then I will find new society, Ophelia said. Papa, I know you want to protect me, but you cannot. I have to live my own life, make my own choices, even if they turn out to be wrong. But I do not think this is wrong. I think this is the rightest thing I have ever done. There was a long, painful silence. Then her mother spoke, her voice thick with tears. Will you at least have a proper ceremony? Let us witness your marriage, even if we cannot bless it. Ophelia felt her own eyes filling. Of course, Mama. I would like that very much. And take some money, her father said gruffly. I have savings put aside for your future. If you are determined to do this fool thing, at least let me help ensure you do not starve on the trail. Ophelia crossed the room and hugged her father fiercely, then her mother, the three of them clinging together as a family one last time. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for understanding, even though you do not approve. The next day, Ophelia and Quinn were married by a justice of the peace in a brief civil ceremony. Only Ophelia's parents and cousin Sarah attended, along with one of Quinn's friends from the Barker Ranch who agreed to serve as a witness. Ophelia wore a simple blue dress instead of the elaborate wedding gown that had been meant for Thomas, and she carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that Quinn had picked for her that morning. The ceremony was nothing like the grand church wedding that had been planned, but Ophelia did not care. When she looked into Quinn's eyes and spoke her vows, she felt a certainty and joy that had been entirely absent during her engagement to Thomas. This was right. This was real. I, Ophelia Owens, take you, Quinn Thornton, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Quinn's voice was steady and strong as he repeated his own vows, sliding a simple gold band onto her finger. They had purchased the rings that morning with some of Quinn's saved wages, and though they were plain and unadorned, Ophelia treasured hers more than any diamond. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with such tenderness that Ophelia forgot anyone else was in the room. This was her husband now, her partner, her love. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They left Laredo 3 days later, giving Ophelia time to pack her belongings and say her goodbyes. Her mother cried the entire time, alternating between helping her daughter pack and trying one last time to convince her to stay. Her father gave Quinn a stern talking to about taking care of his daughter, which Quinn endured with patience and understanding. Sarah hugged Ophelia fiercely and made her promise to write whenever possible. I think you are very brave, Sarah whispered, and I think Quinn is lucky to have you. I am the lucky one, Ophelia said, but she hugged her cousin tight, knowing she would miss her terribly. On the morning they were to leave, Ophelia stood in her childhood bedroom one last time, looking at the bed where she had slept for 22 years, the desk where she had written in her diary, the window where she had gazed out at the Texas sky and dreamed of adventure. She was about to get more adventure than she had ever bargained for, and the thought filled her with equal parts excitement and terror. Quinn appeared in the doorway, his saddlebags packed and ready. Are you sure about this, Ophelia? We can still change our minds. I could go north alone, get established, and send for you later when things are more secure. Ophelia shook her head. I am not letting you leave without me, Quinn Thornton. You are stuck with me now, for better or worse, remember? I remember, he said softly, crossing the room to take her in his arms. And I choose better. Always better. They rode out of Laredo together on a hot June morning, Ophelia seated behind Quinn on his strong bay gelding, her arms wrapped around his waist and her face pressed against his back. A pack mule carried their supplies and Ophelia's trunk of belongings. It was not much to start a new life with, but it was enough. As the town disappeared behind them and the open country stretched ahead, Ophelia felt something inside her unfurl like a bird taking flight. Yes, she was afraid. Yes, she was leaving behind everything familiar. But she was also free in a way she had never been before, free to choose her own path and write her own story. The journey north was harder than Ophelia had imagined. They traveled through the scorching heat of a Texas summer, making camp each night wherever they could find water and shelter. Quinn was patient with her inexperience, teaching her how to make a bedroll, how to start a fire, how to cook beans and bacon in a cast-iron skillet over open flames. Ophelia learned quickly, determined not to be a burden. At night, they would lie together under a blanket beneath the vast canopy of stars, and Quinn would point out constellations, telling her their names and stories. Those were Ophelia's favorite moments, when the world seemed enormous and full of possibilities, when she felt small but significant, a part of something much larger than herself. They made love for the first time on their fourth night on the trail, in a grove of live oak trees near a creek. Quinn was gentle and patient, mindful of Ophelia's inexperience, and though there was some pain, there was also wonder and intimacy and a connection that made Ophelia understand why poets wrote about passion. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in their bedroll, and Ophelia felt a profound gratitude for the courage she had shown in choosing this life. "Are you happy?" Quinn asked, stroking her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Ophelia said truthfully. "Are you?" "I never knew I could feel this way," Quinn admitted. "I spent so many years drifting alone, convincing myself that I did not need anyone. But you, Ophelia, you have shown me what I was missing. You are everything I did not know I wanted." They pressed together in the darkness, two souls learning each other, building something new and precious in the wilderness. But the trail was not all romance and starlight. There were dangers too, realities that Ophelia had to learn quickly. They encountered a band of travelers who tried to rob them one afternoon, rough men who saw a woman as easy prey. Quinn drew his pistol with a speed that shocked Ophelia, his voice deadly calm as he told the men to ride on or face the consequences. They left, but the incident shook Ophelia, making her realize how vulnerable they were out here, with no law to protect them. Another time, they ran into a storm that seemed to come from nowhere, turning the sky black and pelting them with rain hard enough to bruise. They took shelter in a rocky overhang, huddled together and soaked to the skin, waiting for the weather to pass. Ophelia shivered uncontrollably, and Quinn wrapped her in his coat, his body heat gradually warming her. "This is what I worried about," he said quietly. "The hardships of this life. You should be in a comfortable home, not freezing in a storm." "I would rather freeze with you than be comfortable without you," Ophelia said through chattering teeth. "Stop trying to send me back, husband. I am here to stay." Quinn kissed her forehead. "I am beginning to believe you mean that." "I do." As they traveled farther north, the landscape gradually changed. The flat brushland of South Texas gave way to rolling hills, and eventually they entered territory where trees grew thicker and grass grew greener. They passed through small frontier towns where they could resupply, and each time, Quinn asked about work opportunities. In a town called Abilene, they heard about a ranch owner named Jacob Marsh who was looking for experienced hands. The ranch was 2 days' ride west, in country that was still being settled. Quinn and Ophelia decided to investigate. The Marsh Ranch was sprawling and well-maintained, with good grazing land and a large herd of cattle. Jacob Marsh himself was a weathered man in his 50s, tough but fair-minded. He looked Quinn over critically, asking pointed questions about his experience. "I can handle cattle, horses, whatever needs doing," Quinn said. "I have worked ranches all over Texas and New Mexico. I am not afraid of hard work, and I do not cause trouble." Marsh nodded slowly. "What about her?" He gestured at Ophelia, who was waiting nearby with the horses. "This is rough country. Can she handle it?" "She is stronger than she looks," Quinn said. "And she is my wife, so where I go, she goes." Marsh considered this, then spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "All right, Thornton, I will give you a trial. There is a line shack about 5 miles from here that needs a couple to manage it. You will be responsible for watching the north pastures, repairing fences, dealing with any problems that arise. It is isolated, and the work is hard, but the pay is fair, and you will have a roof over your heads. If you do well, we can talk about something more permanent come fall." Quinn looked at Ophelia, and she nodded eagerly. A real home, even if it was just a small cabin, sounded like heaven after weeks on the trail. "We will take it," Quinn said, shaking Marsh's hand. The line shack was a rough log cabin with a single room, a stone fireplace, and windows covered with oiled paper instead of glass. But to Ophelia, it looked beautiful. There was a bed frame that they could put their own mattress on, a table and 2 chairs, shelves for storage, and hooks on the wall for hanging clothes and gear. It was theirs, at least for the summer, a place they could make into a home. They spent the first few days cleaning and settling in. Ophelia scrubbed every surface while Quinn repaired the roof and reinforced the door. She hung curtains she sewed from spare fabric, arranged their few possessions to make the space feel cozy, and even planted some wildflower seeds around the cabin to brighten the area. Quinn threw himself into the work with determination, riding out before dawn each day to check the cattle and fences, returning after dark, exhausted but satisfied. Ophelia kept the cabin, cooked their meals, and learned the rhythms of ranch life. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and she took pride in it. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, and Ophelia would read aloud from the few books she had brought with her. Quinn loved to listen to her voice, and she loved sharing the stories with him. Sometimes they would just talk, sharing pieces of their pasts, learning each other's histories. "Tell me about your family," Ophelia asked one night as they lay in bed, the cabin dark except for the dying glow of the fireplace. Quinn was quiet for a long moment. "There is not much to tell. My parents had a small farm in Missouri. Good people, but the land was not fertile, and money was always tight. When the war came, I enlisted. I was only 17, thought I was going to be a hero." "Were you?" Ophelia asked gently. "No, I was just a scared kid who saw terrible things and did terrible things because I was told to. When it was over, I went home, but my parents had died while I was gone. Influenza took them both within days of each other. The farm was lost for back taxes. There was nothing left for me there, so I headed west and never looked back." Ophelia turned in his arms to look at his face in the dim light. "I am sorry, Quinn. That must have been so difficult, losing everything." "It was a long time ago," Quinn said, but she could hear the old pain in his voice. "I made my peace with it. And maybe it all happened the way it did, so I would end up in Laredo at exactly the right moment to meet you. I like to think that sometimes." "I like to think that too," Ophelia whispered, kissing him softly. Summer deepened, and Ophelia and Quinn fell into a comfortable routine. The work was demanding, but rewarding, and they took satisfaction in doing it well. Jacob Marsh came by periodically to check on them, and each time he seemed more impressed with their performance. The fences were in good repair, the cattle were healthy, and the couple was clearly dedicated to their responsibilities. One day in late July, Marsh brought his wife Martha with him, a plump, cheerful woman who took an immediate liking to Ophelia. "It must be lonely out here with just the two of you," Martha said as they sat in the cabin drinking coffee. "You must come to the main house for supper some Sunday, I insist. A young woman needs other women to talk to sometimes." Ophelia was touched by the invitation and gladly accepted. The following Sunday, she and Quinn rode to the main ranch house and were welcomed warmly. Martha had prepared a feast, and there were several other ranch families there, all curious about the new couple. For the first time since leaving Laredo, Ophelia felt like she was part of a community again, accepted and valued. As summer turned to fall, Jacob Marsh offered Quinn a permanent position as one of his senior hands, with a small salary increase and the promise of a better cabin closer to the main ranch. Quinn and Ophelia celebrated that night, dancing together in their little line shack to music only they could hear, laughing and spinning until they were dizzy. "We did it," Ophelia said, breathless and happy. "We made it work, Quinn." "You made it work," Quinn corrected, pulling her close. "I would have given up a dozen times if not for you. Your courage, your determination, your belief in us. You are the reason I am still here, still trying." "We are the reason," Ophelia said firmly. "Together, always." That winter was hard, with bitter cold and heavy snows, but Ophelia and Quinn weathered it together in their new, better insulated cabin. They huddled by the fire on the coldest nights, wrapped in quilts and each other's warmth. Ophelia discovered she was pregnant in January, and the news filled them both with a mixture of joy and terror. "Are you frightened?" Quinn asked, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "A little," Ophelia admitted, "but mostly I am excited. A baby, Quinn, our baby, a child who will grow up free and loved, who will never have to wonder if they are safe in their own home." Quinn's eyes were suspiciously bright. "You are going to be an amazing mother. And you will be an amazing father," Ophelia said with certainty. Martha Marsh became a godsend during Ophelia's pregnancy, offering advice and reassurance, sharing her own experiences of bearing children on the frontier. She helped Ophelia prepare for the birth, gathering supplies and teaching her what to expect. The other ranch wives rallied around as well, creating a support network that made Ophelia feel less isolated and afraid. The baby came in late summer, a healthy boy with Quinn's gray eyes and a powerful set of lungs. They named him James, after Quinn's father, and from the moment Ophelia held him in her arms, she understood a depth of love she had never imagined possible. Quinn was utterly smitten with his son, cradling him gently despite his rough cowboy hands, whispering promises about the life they would build together. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Quinn continued to work for Jacob Marsh, proving himself invaluable to the ranch operations. He was eventually promoted to foreman, a position that came with more responsibility and better pay. They were able to save money, planning for a future when they might be able to purchase their own land. Ophelia thrived in her role as a mother and ranch wife. She became friends with the other women, joined in community gatherings, and even started a small school in the bunkhouse during winter months to teach reading and writing to the ranch children. She never forgot her love of books and learning, and she was determined to pass that passion on to James and to any other children who wanted to learn. 2 years after James was born, Ophelia gave birth to a daughter they named Eleanor, a sweet-tempered baby with dark curls and her mother's smile. Quinn adored his daughter, and Ophelia loved watching him with both children, seeing the gentle patience he showed them. He was everything Thomas Whitmore could never have been, a father who would never raise his hand in anger, who protected with love rather than intimidation. One evening, when James was 5 and Eleanor was 3, the family sat together on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Quinn had his arm around Ophelia's shoulders, and she leaned into his solid warmth, feeling profoundly content. "Do you ever regret it?" Quinn asked quietly. "Leaving Laredo, giving up the life you could have had?" Ophelia looked at her husband, at the man who had shown her what real love looked like, who had given her freedom and partnership, and a family built on respect and tenderness. She thought about the alternative, about what her life would have been if she had married Thomas Whitmore, trapped in a grand house with a violent man, afraid and alone despite being surrounded by luxury. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This life, this family, you, these are worth more than all the wealth and comfort in the world. You saved me, Quinn, that day in the church and every day since." "We saved each other," Quinn said, kissing her temple. "I was lost before I found you. You gave me a reason to stop drifting, a reason to build instead of just survive. I thank God every day that I walked into that church and saw you standing there, brave enough to speak the truth even when it cost you everything." "A man like that will hit you too," Ophelia quoted softly, remembering the words Quinn had spoken to her that first day. "You were right. Thomas showed his true nature before it was too late, and you helped me see what I needed to see. You gave me the courage to save myself." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their children play. James was showing Eleanor how to catch lightning bugs in the gathering dusk, both of them giggling as the insects blinked in their cupped hands. It was a perfect moment, simple and ordinary and more precious than gold. As the years continued to pass, Ophelia occasionally thought about her life in Laredo, wondering what had become of Thomas Whitmore and his family. She had written to her parents regularly since leaving, and they had eventually softened toward her choice, admitting in their letters that they were proud of the life she had built and the woman she had become. Her mother wrote that Thomas had eventually married another girl from a wealthy family, but rumors circulated about his temper and his cruelty behind closed doors. Ophelia felt sad for Thomas's wife, but grateful that she had escaped that fate. Quinn and Ophelia continued to work and save, and when James was 7, they finally had enough money to purchase their own small ranch. It was not large, just 40 acres with a creek running through it, and enough grazing land for a modest herd. But it was theirs. They built a house together, with help from friends and neighbors, and Ophelia planted a garden and fruit trees, creating the home she had always dreamed of. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Quinn proved to be as good at managing his own operation as he had been at working for others. He hired a few hands during busy seasons, always treating them fairly and with respect, building a reputation as a good man to work for. Ophelia continued her teaching, eventually building a small schoolhouse on their property, where children from the surrounding ranches could come for lessons. More children came over the years. A third child, another son they named Samuel, arrived when James was 9. Then twins, a boy and girl they called Peter and Rose, were born when Ophelia was 32. Their home was loud and chaotic and filled with love, everything Ophelia had never known she wanted. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Ophelia with a gift. He presented her with a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. "I know how much you love stories," he said. "I thought maybe you would want to write your own, tell our story, how we met and everything that has happened since, so our children and grandchildren will know." Ophelia was deeply moved by the thoughtful gift. That night, after the children were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with a lamp burning bright and opened the journal to the first page. She thought about everything they had been through, all the struggles and triumphs, the fear and the joy, and she began to write. "The last thing I expected on my wedding day was to discover that my fiancé was a monster, but sometimes the truth arrives with the force of a bullet, fast and brutal and impossible to ignore." She wrote for hours, pouring their story onto the pages, preserving it for future generations. She wrote about Thomas Whitmore and the moment everything changed, about Quinn walking into that church like something from a story, about the courage it took to choose an uncertain future over a secure prison. She wrote about the journey north, the hardships and the romance, the building of a life from nothing but love and determination. When Quinn found her still writing in the early hours of the morning, he read over her shoulder, his arms coming around her waist. "That is beautiful," he said softly. "You have a gift with words, Ophelia." "I am just telling the truth," she said, leaning back against him. "Our truth." As their children grew older, Ophelia shared the journal with them, wanting them to understand where they came from and what their parents had overcome to build their family. James, as the eldest, was especially fascinated by the story, asking his parents endless questions about their past. "Were you scared when you left Laredo?" he asked his mother one evening. "Terrified," Ophelia admitted. "But I was more scared of staying and marrying the wrong man. Fear should not stop you from doing what is right, but it should warn you away from what is wrong. The trick is learning to tell the difference." "How did you know Father was right?" Eleanor asked. Ophelia looked at Quinn, who was whittling a toy horse for Samuel by the fireplace. "Because he was kind, because he treated everyone with respect, not just the people who could benefit him. Because he saw me as a person, not as property. And because when he looked at me, I felt safe and valued and loved." Quinn glanced up and met her eyes, and the smile they shared held a decade of history, of shared joy and struggle and unwavering partnership. When James was 16, he asked his father about Thomas Whitmore, about the man his mother had almost married. Quinn set down the harness he was repairing and looked at his son seriously. "Your mother made the bravest choice I have ever seen a person make. She walked away from security and respectability because she recognized that some things are worse than poverty or scandal. Violence in a marriage is one of those things. A man who would hit his own mother, James, is a man who will eventually hit his wife, his children, anyone weaker than himself. That is not strength. That is cowardice dressed up as power." "How did you know that?" James asked. "I have seen it before, in other places, other times. I have known men like Thomas Whitmore, men who use violence to control the people around them, and I have seen the damage they leave behind. Your mother was smart enough and brave enough to recognize the warning signs before it was too late. That is why I said what I did that day in Laredo, why I told her the truth, even though we barely knew each other. Some things are too important not to say." James absorbed this thoughtfully. "I am glad she listened to you." "So am I, son. So am I." The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By the time Quinn and Ophelia had been married for 20 years, they had expanded their holdings, built a larger house, and established themselves as respected members of their community. Their children were thriving, each finding their own path in the world. James showed an aptitude for ranching and worked alongside his father. Eleanor had a gift for teaching like her mother and helped run the school. Samuel loved horses and was training to be a farrier. The twins were still young, but showed promise in their own ways. Ophelia often thought about how different her life might have been if she had gone through with that first wedding. She would have been Mrs. Thomas Whitmore, living in Laredo in a fine house, wearing expensive dresses, hosting elegant parties, and she would have been miserable, trapped with a cruel man, probably bearing the marks of his temper, teaching her children to fear their father. Instead, she was Ophelia Thornton, wife to a good man, mother to 5 healthy children, owner of a thriving ranch, teacher to dozens of students over the years. She was happy in a deep, abiding way that she had never imagined possible back when she was 22 and preparing to marry for all the wrong reasons. One autumn evening, when the leaves were turning gold and the air had a crisp edge, Ophelia and Quinn took a rare moment alone together, walking up to a hill on their property that overlooked the entire ranch. They stood together watching the sun set, their hands clasped, their bodies close. "I have been thinking about that day at the church," Quinn said quietly, "about how differently everything could have turned out. If I had not been passing through Laredo at that exact moment, if I had not heard the commotion and gone to investigate, if I had kept my mouth shut instead of interfering." "But you did not," Ophelia said. "You were there, and you spoke up, and you changed my life. Do you believe in fate, Quinn?" He considered the question. "I do not know if I believe everything is predetermined, but I do think that sometimes we are put in certain places at certain times for a reason. Maybe I was meant to be in Laredo that day. Maybe you were meant to see what you saw in that garden. Maybe all of it had to happen exactly as it did, so we could end up here, together, with this life we have built." "I like that idea," Ophelia said softly, "that all the pain and struggle and fear led us to something beautiful." "You are what is beautiful," Quinn said, turning to face her fully. "You were beautiful that day in your wedding dress, standing up for yourself even when the whole world was watching. You were beautiful when you insisted on coming with me even though I had nothing to offer you. You were beautiful, learning to cook over a campfire and sleep on the hard ground without complaint. You have been beautiful every single day of our marriage, Ophelia, and I've fallen in love with you more with each passing year." Ophelia felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you too, Quinn Thornton. You are the best man I have ever known, and I thank God every day that you walked into that church." They kissed there on the hillside as the sun dipped below the horizon, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. The years continued to flow past like the creek that ran through their property, steady and unchanging in its essential nature, even as the details shifted and evolved. James married at 24, bringing a good woman named Catherine to the family. Eleanor wed at 22 to a school teacher from the next town over. Samuel found work at a large ranch in Colorado, but came home for visits several times a year. The twins grew into capable young adults, Peter deciding to study law, and Rose showing a talent for medicine. Quinn and Ophelia became grandparents, and they approached that role with the same love and dedication they had shown as parents. James and Catherine's children spent summers on the ranch, learning to ride and work cattle and appreciate the land. Eleanor's children came for long visits where Ophelia would read to them for hours, sharing her love of stories. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house and spilled out into the yard. There was music and dancing, abundant food, and a general atmosphere of joy and gratitude. As the party wound down and the sun began to set, Quinn asked for everyone's attention. "I want to say something," he announced, standing with his arm around Ophelia. 30 years ago, I was a drifter with no real purpose beyond the next job, the next paycheck. I thought I was content, but I was really just avoiding the possibility of disappointment or loss. Then I met this woman, and everything changed." He looked at Ophelia with such love that she felt her heart swell. She was the bravest person I had ever met, walking away from a bad situation even when it cost her dearly. She took a chance on me when I had nothing to offer but a horse and a heart full of hope. She built this life with me, this family, this legacy. Everything good in my world exists because of Ophelia Thornton." Their children and grandchildren applauded, several wiping away tears. Ophelia stood up and kissed her husband, not caring that everyone was watching. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "Today, tomorrow, and always." As they grew older together, Quinn and Ophelia gradually passed more of the ranch responsibilities to James and his family, though they never fully retired. Quinn still went out to check the herds even in his 60s, and Ophelia continued teaching until she was well past 70. The work was part of who they were, and they could not imagine life without it. They spent their later years surrounded by family, watching their grandchildren grow and begin families of their own. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and reminiscing about their adventures, their struggles, their triumphs. They never took for granted how lucky they had been to find each other, to build something real and lasting from a chance meeting in a church on what should have been the worst day of Ophelia's life. When Quinn was 73, he suffered a fall from his horse while checking fences and injured his hip badly. For the first time in their marriage, he was confined to the house for weeks while he healed. Ophelia nursed him patiently, reading to him, keeping him company, refusing to let him sink into frustration or despair. "I am useless," he complained one afternoon. "I cannot work, cannot help with the ranch, cannot even walk without pain." "You are not useless," Ophelia said firmly. "You are healing, and that is important work. Besides, I like having you here with me all day. It reminds me of those first days in the line shack when it was just the two of us against the world." Quinn managed a smile. "We have come a long way from that little cabin, Haven, not we?" "We have," Ophelia agreed. "But the important things have not changed. I still love you just as much as I did then. More, if that is possible." "It is possible," Quinn said, reaching for her hand. "Because I feel the same way." Quinn eventually recovered and was able to return to light work, though he never regained his full mobility. But he adapted, learning to do what he could and accepting help with what he could not. His pride had mellowed with age, replaced by a grateful appreciation for each day he was given. Ophelia remained remarkably healthy, well into her 70s, though her hair turned completely white and her hands developed arthritis that made sewing and writing difficult. She adapted too, using her voice to teach when her hands would not cooperate, telling stories to her great-grandchildren instead of writing them down. On a warm spring day in 1899, Ophelia and Quinn sat on their porch, now in their late 70s, and watched their great-grandchildren play in the yard. It was a peaceful scene, full of laughter and life, everything they had hoped to build when they first headed north from Laredo over 4 decades before. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Ophelia asked. "After the wedding that was not?" Quinn thought back across the years. "I said a few things. Which one do you mean?" "You told me that a man who would hit his own mother is a man who will hit his wife too. You spoke the truth I needed to hear, even though you did not know me at all. You gave me the courage to trust my instincts and walk away." Quinn nodded slowly. "I spoke from experience and observation. I had seen too much violence in my life, seen too many women trapped with men who hurt them. When I saw Thomas strike his mother, I knew exactly what kind of man he was. And when I saw you, I knew you deserved better." "You gave me better," Ophelia said softly. "You gave me a life built on love and respect and partnership. You never once raised your hand to me or our children in anger. You showed me what a real man looks like, what real strength means. Real strength is protecting the weak, not exploiting them," Quinn said. "Real strength is building up instead of tearing down. Those are the lessons I hope we have passed on to our children and grandchildren." "I think we have," Ophelia said, watching the children play. "Look at them, Quinn. Our legacy, strong, kind, capable people who know what love looks like because we showed them." They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, hearts content. The sun was warm on their faces, and somewhere in the distance cattle were lowing, the eternal sound of ranch life. This was everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of during those uncertain early days when their future was nothing but hope and determination. "No regrets?" Quinn asked, as he had asked so many times over the years. "Not a single one," Ophelia said, as she always did. "You are my greatest adventure, Quinn Thornton, and I would choose you again and again, in every lifetime." Quinn lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And I would choose you, always." They sat together as the afternoon faded into evening, two people who had beaten the odds and built a beautiful life from the ashes of a scandal. They had loved deeply and weathered storms and raised a family that would carry their values forward into the new century. They had proven that courage and love could overcome any obstacle, that the right choice is not always the easy choice, and that sometimes the best moments in life come from the willingness to walk away from what is expected and walk toward what is right. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Ophelia leaned her head on Quinn's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid warmth of his presence. This was home. This was love. This was the happy ending she had fought for and earned, one day at a time, one choice at a time, from that fateful moment in a Laredo church when a cowboy had told her the truth she needed to hear. "A man like that will hit you too," she whispered to the night, remembering. And beside her, Quinn squeezed her hand gently, a silent reminder that she had listened, that she had been brave, that she had chosen well. They had built a life on that foundation of courage and honesty, and it had sustained them through everything. Now, in their twilight years, they could look back with satisfaction and forward with hope, knowing that their story would live on in the hearts and memories of everyone they loved. The journey that had begun with a cowboy's warning in a church had led to a lifetime of love, and that was the greatest gift of all.